Hello everyone, I'm Heather and this is Heather Travels. Thank you for taking the time to watch this video. In today's episode of Misadventures in Travel, I'm going to tell you the story of how the circumstances of the 2020 pandemic caused me to have to ignore some of my best travel advice. If you enjoy travel content and you've watched even a couple of my videos, I encourage you to please support my channel by subscribing to the channel. It's really easy, it's free, it doesn't cost you anything. And also, if you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up down below. If you haven't yet watched any of the other videos in my Misadventures in Travel playlist, I will link that up above here. It's a very interesting playlist. It's a series of videos that I've made over time, over the last 2.5 years, of past travel experiences where something went wrong. And in each of the videos, I share the story of what went wrong, what happened, and then I also share a lesson that hopefully will help you to avoid those kind of challenging travel scenarios in the future. Okay, the story I'm going to share with you tonight picks up right after last week's video. If you haven't yet watched last week's video where we stopped to visit the Crazy Horse Monument and Mount Rushmore in South Dakota, I will link that right up here. You'll notice if you watch that video that the sun was setting, okay? This was late August, and I think it was about August 24th or 25th, and we were headed home. So we had left Estes Park, Colorado. We had driven up through Wyoming and into South Dakota. Mount Rushmore is on the far western side of South Dakota. And we were going to have to drive all the way across South Dakota, all the way across Minnesota, and then back home to Wisconsin. So that was our plan. First, I have to tell you that this was already a change of plan a couple different times. Our original plan had been to come back home from Colorado the exact same way that we went out there, through Nebraska and Iowa. If you go back, I have a couple of videos of the 2 hotels that we stayed in during that stretch of the trip. I decided that was a pretty boring drive, and I just wanted some more variety in the trip and decided that it would be fun to go back a different way. And also, in our video where I asked people to make guesses about where we were going on that trip, a bunch of people guessed Mount Rushmore. And we weren't originally planning on going to Mount Rushmore, but that got me thinking, we could easily stop there and then that would give the kids a chance to see it. I had been there before. So I altered our route to come back the more northern way, to go up from Estes Park, across like the little corner of Wyoming and into South Dakota, and then come back that way. So that's what we were doing. At one point, while we were in Colorado, I had also considered extending the trip and going to Grand Teton and maybe Yellowstone in western Wyoming. And I even made a hotel reservation out there. But that would have added an additional 2 to 3 days to our trip. And in the end, I decided to cancel that and not do that because mainly for me, it just got to be way too much driving. This was a lot of driving for just me to be doing by myself. I was the only one who could drive. Megan doesn't have her driver's license yet. So it was a lot of driving, and it just made me very tired, and I decided I didn't want to do that. I am a little disappointed that we didn't get to go to Yellowstone and Grand Teton because I'm not sure if I ever will, mainly because you have to drive to get there. Okay, so we had left our rental condo in Estes Park, Colorado, at a good time in the morning, and we drove the whole way in one day. We drove all the way to the Crazy Horse Monument and Mount Rushmore. And like we said in the video, we were at Mount Rushmore at about 6 p.m. So we had driven that whole way. And that actually had put me ahead of schedule because I had made a hotel reservation at the Holiday Inn Express in Keystone, South Dakota, which is the town right closest to Mount Rushmore, for that night. And what I originally intended was that we were going to get to the hotel first, stay overnight in the hotel, then go to Mount Rushmore in the morning. And then my plan for the subsequent days was to go to Mount Rushmore in the morning, drive through the Black Hills the rest of that day, and then I had another hotel reservation in Sioux Falls, South Dakota for that night. And so those 2 hotel reservations, I'll just tell you right now, we didn't stay at either of those hotels. and I'll tell you why. The first thing that happened was that we were ahead of schedule. We were ahead of schedule getting to the monument. It just wasn't as far as I thought, or it went faster or whatever. Once we got out of Colorado, there really wasn't any other traffic to speak of. We were kind of the only people on the road. By the time we got to Crazy Horse, I think it was probably like 5 o'clock then. We just said, oh, okay, let's stop and see this. And then we went to Mount Rushmore. We're like, well, we're here. We might as well go to it now. But I have to tell you that we felt very, very uncomfortable in South Dakota. People in South Dakota were not at that time, and as far as I can tell from the data, are still not taking the pandemic seriously at all. There was basically no mask compliance in South Dakota whatsoever. I was very disappointed that, like, when we were at the Crazy Horse Monument, I noticed there were a lot of cars there from other states, including states out east. And I was very surprised to see people getting out of those cars who also weren't wearing their masks. So that was really kind of disheartening. We, of course, wore our masks the entire time. You can see that in our pictures. The only time we took them off was to snap a quick photo with Mount Rushmore behind us. Otherwise, you can see in our videos that we wear our masks all the time when we're out around other people. We were pretty nervous to be around this many people in South Dakota, and it was making us very uncomfortable. When we left Mount Rushmore at the end of that last video, we went to Keystone, which was just a little ways away, and Keystone was packed with people. It was very, very busy. There were people everywhere. However, another problem was we had not yet had dinner. We were hungry and we hadn't had dinner yet. And it appeared like, well, there were very few restaurants in Keystone, South Dakota. And I didn't see anything. If there was anything where we could drive through, I don't remember. I didn't see it. So that was a problem. There were people everywhere. Nobody's wearing masks. There's nothing we can drive through. We'd have to get out, go inside. It was just a very uncomfortable, nerve-wracking situation. We felt very nervous and very scared about the virus. I mean, just mobs of people everywhere, nobody masked. And so we got around the corner to our hotel. It wasn't very far. We found it. We parked in the parking lot and we had a very quick discussion. And I was internally so angry with myself because I was like, dang it, I can't cancel this now. It was too late to cancel the hotel. I mean, we could have been checked in already. It was, probably 6:30. The evening we were supposed to be checking in, it was too late for me to cancel. I was going to lose the money for that night's room, which I really hate to do that. I've never done that before, I don't think ever. And it was like $160 some. And I was very frustrated with myself. So I was like, darn it. And I was looking at the map. We were sitting in the parking lot. The kids were saying there were a lot of people milling about outside the hotel. It wasn't like when we had stayed at some of the previous Hampton Inns, when we went to Wisconsin Dells and earlier in the trip where we could just sneak in the side door, never have any contact with any other people. It wasn't like that. There were people everywhere and nobody was wearing masks. And the kids said, Mom, I don't feel comfortable staying here. And I said, I agree with you. I don't feel comfortable staying here either. I mean, just based on what we saw from the outside, we were very concerned what it was going to be like on the inside. Holiday Inn is not a brand we stay with very often. And in fact, I can't remember the last time I've stayed at a Holiday Inn. So I didn't have any idea what to expect as far as pandemic protocols in there. And South Dakota didn't have a mask mandate. We were sitting there in the car and I was looking at the map and I was trying to figure out what our options were. And I was really just stressed. And I'm like, we're just going to go. And I also felt like it was too early to stop for the night. It was too early to stop for the night. And I know what I figured out. That since we'd already gone to Mount Rushmore and that was supposed to be our activity for the next day, since we'd already done that, if we stopped for the night now, it wasn't far enough to Sioux Falls where I had the next night's hotel reservation for that to be a whole day of driving there. And Sioux Falls to home is not far enough. I guess the distances were not working out. Here's something I need to share with you. Something I have shared with my kids many, many times that I absolutely hated about how my father would do road trips. We did many, many road trips when I was younger and where my dad drove, and sometimes I drove, I'm sure, when I was a teenager and an adult. And his philosophies when he was planning the trips or how he would do things, I did not agree with at all, and I still don't. And this is exactly the position I found myself in, unfortunately, because of this. When we would take road trips with my dad, he never made a plan of how far we would go each day. He didn't plan what city we would stop in. I mean, he might have had a loose idea in his head, and he never made reservations for hotels in advance. He might make reservations for hotels in advance if we were going to end up in, this city and we were going to be there for a few days. He'd make that hotel reservation, but he wouldn't make reservations for hotels along the way. And so what my dad would do, my dad had this kind of mantra of we're going to drive as far as we possibly can every day. He always pushed us to the limits with driving. And on this trip, I told the kids, I don't ever want to drive more than 8 hours in a day. And one thing I definitely didn't want to do was I didn't ever want to drive after dark. And so for the whole trip up until this point that I'm talking about now, we had stuck to that and we were doing really well. Because after that, I just get too tired. And it's a proven fact that if you drive, through the day and then after it gets dark, it just feels longer. Plus now you've got reduced visibility. There could be deer in the road. It's harder for you to see. You're getting tired. There's a whole bunch of issues with driving after dark. With my dad, he would drive us as long. So I don't know. I feel like we would drive like 12, 13, 14 hours a day or something ridiculous. I think what would normally happen is I would finally say, Dad, I'm so tired. Can we please just stop and stay somewhere? And then he'd finally be like, okay. And he'd pull off at the next town he saw with a hotel. And I would always have to wait in the car. And he would go inside and find out how much it was. And we would run into two problems. Number one, my dad would decide that the hotel was too expensive. And so we'd have to leave and go find a different one. And sometimes that meant going to the next exit or another 50 miles. And the other problem was, because he hadn't made reservations, oftentimes we would start to look for a hotel at, 11 o'clock at night, and there'd be no vacancy. So I really always hated that when I traveled with my dad. I really have kind of drilled into my kids, this is not something that you should do, and I'm not going to do that. Okay? So keep that in mind as I'm telling you this story. So we decided we were not going to stay at the Holiday Inn in Keystone, South Dakota. We drove away and I just started driving. And in my head, I'm going cha-ching because I just lost $160 some. And I'm like, crap. And so now it's very close to the last day of the trip. I'm going to run out of money. So the next thing that I did, because I realized that with the distances, it wasn't going to work out right to stay in Sioux Falls either, is I did go online right away. That was a Hampton I had reserved in Sioux Falls. I went on the Hilton Honors app right away and canceled the hotel in Sioux Falls. Like, okay, I'm not going to pay for 2 nights of hotel that I'm not going to use. So I canceled that. So now I have no hotel to stay in. I have no reservation anymore for the rest of the way home. Okay, so we drove away from the Holiday Inn in Keystone and we got to Rapid City, which is a pretty sizable city. And we came over this big mountain hill thing. We had not seen a Culver's. We love Culver's. If you don't know what Culver's is a Wisconsin-based fast food restaurant, but it's very high quality food. They have very yummy, good food. They're famous for their butter burgers and their frozen custard. And they have a nice wide menu. Their menu has been a little more limited during the pandemic because they're having trouble getting some things. But we get Culver's. If you watched this video, we get Culver's every Friday night. That's our family tradition. We love Culver's. If you live in the Midwest at all, although I discovered from Tim and Jen Tracker on the Tim Tracker that they have Culver's in Florida, and they got it one night on one of their videos. I don't think it's out east, and it's not out west at all. I think the last place we had seen it was like in Nebraska, or maybe even Iowa. So we hadn't seen a Culver's on this whole trip, and it had been like a week since we'd seen a Culver's. And we came over this hill, and at the bottom of the hill in Rapid City was a Culver's. And literally, Ben and I went, oh, like angels were singing. And because we were so hungry, because like this time it was like 7 o'clock at night. We hadn't had dinner, and we had been having a lot of trouble the whole trip finding places to eat. We really were. And it was a struggle. And so we saw this Culver's and we were like, oh, like heaven had opened and here you go. And so we drove through the Culvers and got our food and parked right in the Culvers parking lot because none of the Culvers are open inside. That's a nationwide thing. That was the only place we saw anybody wearing masks, was the employees in the Culvers, because Culvers as a chain is requiring their employees to wear masks. So we were very pleased to see that. And they were very friendly. And we got our food and we were so happy. And we sat in the parking lot of the Culvers and ate our Culvers. Now, at that point, I was still kind of trying to formulate a plan. But again, I wasn't really too tired. And I really felt then, because now I'd canceled the hotel in Sioux Falls, I'm like, okay, well, the whole plan I had going forward isn't going to work now. If I'd been smart, well, even that wouldn't have worked. Here's the problem. Rapid City home is too far for one day. But Sioux Falls home was too short. And it was too far for me to go all the way to Sioux Falls, the next fairly sizable town in South Dakota, which is on kind of the eastern side of South Dakota. It was too far to go from Rapid City to Sioux Falls that night. So what I needed was to find a hotel somewhere in between there. Because if I found a hotel right then in Rapid City, which I probably could have, there were hotels in Rapid City, I would have been in a conundrum because the next day's driving would have been much too far. Okay, so I said, okay, we're just going to drive, guys. We're going to do exactly what my dad does. We're going to hope for a hotel, somewhere between there. There were 3 things that I did not anticipate happening. So it had been a long time since I'd been in South Dakota. I don't think I had been in South Dakota since before Andrew was born. So it had probably been 25 years since I'd been in South Dakota. The 3 things that I did not anticipate was, number 1, the distances between towns in South Dakota is massive. Even in Nebraska, there were much more frequent, population centers driving along the interstate, and just going along the interstate in South Dakota, the distance between one city and the next would be like 100 some miles. You would just go the longest way before you'd see another town. And that was very frustrating. The second thing I did not anticipate was that hotel choices in South Dakota would be so pathetic. And I think it had to do with the size of the towns. There just weren't enough towns of size that there weren't any good hotel options. We even got off one place and checked in this one town, I don't remember what it was, at what was supposed to be a Best Western. It was a Best Western. But when we had to go way off the road and stuff, it was a motel. It was a sketchy looking motel. And by this point, it was like midnight or 1 o'clock in the morning. And I'm like, I'm not staying there. As a woman, as a single woman with kids, there's no way I'm going to stay in a motel with an outside door. And especially when I'm checking in the middle of the night in some place I've never been and I have no idea where I am. It's just not safe. So that was a big concern. And then the third thing I did not anticipate was that places would be full. I do not remember the name of the town where we actually finally found a place to stay. But I can tell you it was a long, tiring, and very scary process because it was very late. I mean, we were getting into midnight, 1 a.m., maybe even 2 a.m. I think it was 2 a.m. by the time we actually found a place. And I was getting very tired. And Megan was being very helpful and very conscientious of the fact she could see that I was getting really tired. And I was doing my best not to scare the kids. Now, Megan told me later she was thinking all the same things I was. She's very smart. But I was trying not to scare Ben. And I was trying to stay upbeat and like, okay, we're going to find something and try to pretend I'm not as tired as I am. But in my head, I was thinking, and Megan thought the same thing, oh my gosh, what are we going to do if we can't find someplace? Are we going to have to stop at a rest area and sleep in the car? That's what I was afraid was going to happen because I was getting really desperate. Megan was looking at the map and she was like, okay, the next town is this, but then we'd get there and there'd be nothing at the exit, or there'd be no blue sign with the hotels. There was no dining, there was no lodging. And it was just town after town like that. And they were so far apart. And so we were starting to get really scared. And I can't remember the name of the town that we finally stopped in. I should have looked at the map before I made this video. Sorry. Somewhere in the middle of South Dakota, in the middle of the night, we found a town with multiple lodging options. So this was a process of me parking the car, getting out of the car, putting on my mask, going inside, talking to the people, coming back out. Hotel that I stopped at, there were 2 guys on motorcycles who got in there just ahead of me. And then after they got all checked in and everything, I went up to the desk and they told me they had just given their last room to those guys. The place we ended up staying, what was it? I can't remember. It was decent. It wasn't as nice as what we normally stay in, but it was decent enough. It was clean and it was, it was okay. That guy told me, young adult guy, 20 maybe, working at the desk, they didn't have any rooms left on the first floor. Now, normally, you know me, I don't like staying on the first floor, but I had a problem. These were all only 2-story places with stairs and none of them had an elevator. And we had our big luggage because this was a 10-day trip. Well, getting that luggage upstairs, like to get it up and down the stairs when we pack and leave for a trip is hard enough. We don't bring it up full when we come back. We take all the laundry out downstairs and then bring the basically empty suitcase upstairs. I was very worried about that. I'm like, it's 2:00 in the morning. We're dead tired. How are we going to get this luggage up these stairs without an elevator? And that's why I was asking if there was a room on the first floor. And this guy told me, no, there's not. So I left. We ended up checking into a different place, and it was a Choice brand hotel, I'll tell you. And I'm pretty much crossed off Choice brand hotels off my list after this experience. We checked in. We went around to the side door. So I had paid and everything. And no. And it was pet friendly, and 2 guys with 2 big scary looking dogs came at us down the hall and they were like barking at us and stuff. And the room was not good. And we were like, yuck, ick, no, And so we got back in the car. I went back to the desk. I was basically in tears at this point. I told the woman, this is true. This was not the reason I wasn't staying there, but I told her, my son has pet allergies. I didn't realize this was a pet friendly property. We can't stay here. And she said, oh, okay, I'm so sorry. And they did give me my money back. So kudos to you, whatever that Choice hotel was. They did give me my money back. The real reason I wasn't staying there was it was horrible. It was not clean. It was not sanitary. It was not in good shape. It was not good at all. So then I ended up, after that, we were like exhausted at this point. I went back to the place that didn't have any first floor rooms. And I told the guy my situation. I said, do you have any rooms? And I think he only had 1 room left. It was right at the top of the stairs. And he very nicely picked up on how tired we were and what time it was. And he said, I can help you carry your suitcases. And I said, thank you. And so then the kids came in, we got the suitcases. He carried 2 of our big heavy suitcases up the stairs and I carried the 3rd one. We were so tired and we were snapping at each other and arguing, and it was not a good night at all. It was very, very bad. And I will say we did not get very much sleep. I don't know. We maybe got like 5 hours of sleep, maybe, but 6. And then the next day, thankfully, though, we were refreshed enough that from that point, I was able to very easily drive the rest of the way home. And I remember when we passed Sioux Falls, South Dakota, and then I saw how close that was to Minnesota. I'm like, well, that would have been dumb, like to stay there and then drive home the next day, because that isn't that far at all. So that's what happened. It was scary. It was tiring. It was dark. It was not something I recommend doing when you're a single mom traveling with your kids. The kids pretty much never want to return to South Dakota ever. I don't know that we probably will. We probably never will go back to South Dakota. It was just not a good experience, and I don't recommend doing that. And so I'm not sure exactly what the lesson is from this, because the lesson is you need to have reservations in advance. You need to have planned out where you stayed. That is the lesson. And I was trying to take that advice, but circumstances were such that I couldn't. We didn't feel safe in Keystone. We didn't feel safe in South Dakota. We just were very nervous about the circumstances and our safety from a health perspective. And then it became an issue of being nervous about our safety from a violence perspective of some of the options that were there. I guess I have a lesson for South Dakota. You need more lodging. You need more lodging. You need more lodging choices. And there's just not enough. And maybe the state economy can't support more than that. But And boy, those towns in South Dakota are really far apart. So I guess my advice is if you're going to South Dakota, you really need to plan ahead. Really look at the distances between towns. And this would go like for the day if you're looking for places to eat too. And just know that except for Sioux Falls and Rapid City, the towns are not big enough and do not offer enough amenities for travelers to make them very good places to stop. So keep that in mind if you're traveling to South Dakota. It's not the greatest when you have to cross the whole thing east, west, west, east. So I guess that's my lesson from this video. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please be sure to give me a thumbs up. Please be sure to subscribe. And if you haven't checked out the other misadventures and travel videos in this playlist, be sure to do that. There's some equally frightening, if not more frightening, and also some very funny stories in that playlist. Thank you everyone for joining me today, and safe travels.